I'm really happy to be able to introduce Lynn Walford and Rosemary Mupambwa. Is closer, I think, when I did it earlier, Mumpambwa, there we go. And they are going to talk to us about anti-racism. It's a passion for them. And when Lynn came to me to share her idea for a presentation, I thought, you know, it's not anything that we've done before, so let's do it. And I think it's something that we need to be speaking about. So I'm glad that you two have come to us to share that with us. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
So we're here to talk about how to be an anti-racist. And I'm so grateful to have met Rosemary, and she offered actually to come, and then she offered to help, and I was just blown away. So I thought, this is just amazing that we could have her here with us today. I want to tell you that I live in Penticton. Does anyone know where Penticton is? It's Penticton, that's right. And it is the SOICS name, which predates Penticton by thousands of years. I want to give Rosemary a chance to give her introduction to her, what she would like to say today and how we're going to work together.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for giving me this platform. My name is Rosemary Mupambwa. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, which is in Africa, very close to South Africa. Those that know Nelson Mandela, we share a border with the late Nelson Mandela. I came to Canada about 20-something years ago, so now I'm a Canadian citizen. I was widowed at the age of 36. I left Zimbabwe and came over to Canada. I managed to bring over my family and my children. I'm here to talk about how to become an anti-racist. But after I left Alberta, I was in Alberta for almost 23 years, and I worked in the health industry for Alberta Health Services as a domestic violence counselor. I did a lot of work in mental health and also worked with the indigenous community. But after I left that corporate job, I fell in love, and I came over to BC. That's the reason why I'm here. Love makes you do crazy things, right? Yeah, but regardless of that, I came here and I thought, what can I do with my time here in British Columbia? So I founded a women's center called Rose's Life Women's Center. I'm the executive director, and I'm very passionate about working with women. Right now we have a program for seniors. We do crafts with seniors, we do healing circles, and I also run a peer-to-peer group, which is a group for those people that have been affected by racial trauma, and we work hand in hand with SOICS. So today I'm just here to help Lynn.
Thank goodness. Okay, so we will begin. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement. I know that Chandra did give her land acknowledgement, but there's a few things I want to point out about the importance of the land acknowledgement. That first of all, we are gathered here as learning partners. None of us know it all, and we're always learning, and so we've got to look for those opportunities to learn. Secondly is that we are on unceded territory, meaning this is stolen lands. We were never granted guest status by Silixan people. They were removed from the lands we are on. So that's a benefit to white people that's been passed down through the generations. Secondly, the third thing is the word decolonize, and that will come up quite often in our talk about why and how we can do that in our daily practice and life. And one of the things we do is use Silixan language like Penticton. So you try and learn some of the words that go with Silixan language, the Okanagan nations. It is our first step on our journey of learning towards truth and working towards reconciliation. So the truth comes first. So that's what might hurt today, is a little bit of truth. And then we are grateful to live, work, and learn here. And we honor the Okanagan Nation, who have always, for thousands of years, before we came here, cared for these lands, the water and air, and continue to do so today, mostly under the name of guardians. And last summer, I noticed that they had a guardian program even for the bike trail on the other side of the channel that we all use frequently. So an overview of what we'll be talking about. I'm going to be talking about the forum, the phrase, I am not a racist, or the thought process of I am not a racist even, the history of racism, what is systemic racism, and what you can do. So SOICS, our friendly name for the South Okanagan Immigrant and Community Services, put on a forum last spring. It was day-long. It had workshops and speakers and fantastic food and a lot of people that were interested in anti-racism, seeing as that was the title, Confronting the White Elephant, Exploring Anti-Racism. So did anyone attend that forum? No. Oh, Lori did. All right. So from that forum, it inspired me and a number of my cohorts from the church that went, from the Oasis Church, to start our own anti-racism passion cluster in the church. And it's so much easier to work on an issue like this that's so emotional with friends, with people that you trust and have the same interests. And then from there, we've had a book study, we've distributed materials on anti-racism among other churches, and we've also made connections with Indigenous people, our church and Indigenous peoples. And then also another lady that was at the forum and I gave a talk to the emergency support services people. And I found at that talk that people wanted to open up. They had questions. They wanted to talk about this issue. So I got exhausted very quickly at that, emotionally exhausted. And I didn't know very much. So, confronting the white elephant. Well, what is the white elephant? Historically, in the East, the gift of a white elephant was a sacred blessing from the emperor that could not be refused. Would you refuse anything from the prime minister if you were given a gift? Well, in that blessing lay a hidden curse. The upkeep of the elephant was so costly that it would eventually bankrupt the owner. In the West, the term white elephant means an expensive burden, something that fails to meet expectations despite exacting higher and higher costs. The colonial concept of white supremacy and racism, the racism that it fosters, can be seen as the white elephant. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that age-old hatreds are resurging with a vengeance. And this was this year, he said that. And it's exploding from racism to xenophobia, that's fear or hatred for immigrants, and religious intolerance. People are being violently targeted for their religion, their ethnicity, and who they love. So I want to give you a story about that. In 2021, you may remember that it was the 215 unmarked graves were discovered in Kamloops, and those included children from our Penticton Indian Band Reserve. So there's a lot of generational trauma involved with the people that are our neighbors. And if you remember, church was burned down. The church on the reserve was burned down. And at that time, I'll just read to you what I wrote about that whole incident and about a woman named Harsha Walia, who was extremely upset by this whole finding this. It was a very emotional time for me and for anyone who is sympathetic to the Indigenous people. So I wrote this article to the newspaper. I recently heard Harsha Walia as a keynote speaker in a Citizens for Public Justice conference. I learned that her life has been dedicated to the welfare of Canadian people that society has neglected and abused. Our Indigenous people, our immigrants, and our people of color. She has now resigned. She was actually forced to resign as BC Liberties Association Director for a tweet that said, "Burn it all down." Mainstream society is proving its ignorance by claiming a woman of this stature is literally saying, meaning burn it all down. I understand her to be condemning the gruesome genocide of residential school systems that enabled colonialism on stolen First Nations land. I agree with her. We have to figuratively burn down the power model that has created such inhumane inequities. To condemn Ms. Walia in social media, rather than understanding her underlying sentiments, means we have lost, she's still very active, but not as one of our BC institution leaders. We have lost one of the great defenders of Canada's diversity, justice, and vision. She is a highly and respected ally. We should be grateful for her ongoing support and leadership in building a more equitable reality. Now, there's not too many people of caliber like that, and that's what she's talking about with the white elephant. That is what we are working against. So maybe some people know this face. I may get emotional about this. She just died in November. She's an elder from the Penticton Indian Band, and she opened the forum in May with words of wisdom and with a lot of laughter. And the one thing that I remember her saying was that in the Silixan language, there is no such thing, no such word, description for bullying or racism. So their language predates our colonial understanding of those words. Anyway, I'm going to miss her and her happy face. So this is the mission statement of SOICS. SOICS is dedicated to building a welcoming and inclusive community by promoting cultural harmony and diversity based on the mutual respect and full participation of people from all backgrounds. So for 25 years, my career was as a graduate coordinator at the University of Alberta, and it was my responsibility to bring students in and welcome them to our country. And many of them at that time in the sciences were from India and Africa and China. They had exceptional drive to succeed and to become contributing Canadians. And most of them did become Canadians. But now, knowing what I know about the way immigrants are accepted in this country, I feel badly that they may not have experienced a safe, equitable, and inclusive welcome to our country, which is globally recognized and encourages people to come because we are considered a multicultural society.
I would also want to give my land acknowledgement that I'm speaking from the traditional ancestral land of the unceded land of the Senix people of the Okanagan Nation. And My relationship with SOICS began 2 years ago when I started volunteering with cynics, working with seniors and also doing some programs with them, doing some circles, especially for the immigrant women that have fled war in their home countries. When they come over, they are all overwhelmed by the trauma of war. And then when they come here, they are also facing a lot of obstacles, and the biggest one being racism. So I always sit down with them, and then we go through how they can tackle the trauma and how they can also deal with that and also be able to pass down that information to their families. We also sit down in circles where they share their stories about where they came from, how they came to be here in Canada, and what their plans are, and how they can also help each other as women in groups. We have also been added to the Respect group, which is the anti-racism group as well as an organization. So you might be seeing Rose's Life Women's Center added to that list, which is what I represent. And we are also here to create a safe space for everybody. So this is a safe space, feel free to share what you need to share, especially when we go over into the question and answer. And we hope that, what we talk here, if it's going to be personal, is going to remain behind this closed door. People always say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Thank you.
I got married in Vegas. Okay. So the forum presented me with a paradigm shift in my thinking that I am no longer not a racist. What I am is I am working towards being an anti-racist. Then my next paradigm shift came with reading this book while I was doing my research for this talk. This book is his life from the age of 7 right up until he created the Anti-Research Policy Center, and it talks about how racism enters every facet of his life. Now, I'm not sure that that would be the same in Canada, but it entered the cultural, economic, his genders, his family, he could not escape it, and all those steps in becoming more and more anti-racist, having a better understanding of it over many, many years is what I got out of it. That it's not something that you just are suddenly, oh, I'm an anti-racist, I know everything. And so it's important that we learn about what is required, we learn about that together. An example in my life of my becoming an anti-racist, what happened about the same time as, I'd say about the same time that the forum happened. And a friend of mine, Sandy, she's busy here writing notes that I'm going to have to answer to when I get home, is that I said, but there's no colored people in this town. It's a totally white town. And she said, well, what do you mean? We live across from the Sikh temple. Thanks, thanks, Wendy. We live across the Sikh temple. We have our people that help us in the gas stations and the superstore, which is where I shop, and you go to Skaha Beach, and it's many, many families of different races and ethnic groups that are having fun on the beach. So now my eyes are open. I'm looking. And I see people of color everywhere. I see diversity everywhere, which makes anti-racism a study much as it was in Kendi's life. So let me read a letter to you that was composed by Merle and I on what it's like to be racialized and treated, how it is treated as a frontline worker in our area. I won't say exactly where. This is what she wrote for the paper. The weather is changing, and that may put some people over the edge. How do they react? By taking out their frustrations on other people, particularly people who can't defend themselves. If you don't like your job, go back to your home country. You don't know anything. Your stupid bank machine doesn't work. I don't know what you guys are doing here. When I ask for ID, they hate me. On the comical side, why are you guys always missing something? For example, what's the point of having chicken wings and not having any ranch dressing? I try to make my life and my work light, but I am two people. The good one who responds, you know, that's a good point, or I make the question mark face. The other person, the bad me, hates my customers that treat me so disrespectfully, and I feel bad about myself, my work, and my customers. So it's not just the weather. I hear these comments 365 days a year. Our world is short of frontline staff. If you want people to look after you, be respectful, be nice, and say thank you. So that is part of my anti-racism work, is defending people who are not able to say, you know, and she doesn't speak English as a first language. So what we talk about today are things that can lead to further exploration and reflection of events in your own life, in the local, Canadian, and world context. Through, and now what you're working on is an anti-racist lens. So you may think this in your mind. How many people think I am not a racist? Come on, hands up. Don't we all think we're not a racist? I'm not a racist, right? Well, thank you for being honest. Because we are all racists. We are all in a bubble of racism. We can't escape it. We were born into it. We are a product of our upbringing. And I will give you an example from my own life, something I'm not proud of. But when I was about 14, I was working in a high school as an employment officer. We had a little employment center set up in the high school, and we placed up an ad for a service worker, and an Indian boy came in and applied, and I didn't put him forward for that job. And there was no other applicants. It's just, I thought that it would reflect badly on the employment center and me to send out a colored boy to a job. Now I have to live with that for the rest of my life. And so what I would say is that we'll see some of the reasons why. Where did this thinking come from? I didn't even know the racism existed or where the word came from. I had no concepts, except that I knew that white was better than brown. So we're the product of our upbringing and our society. To deny our historical and political roots as racists is to live a lie. I began as a racist, and I'm working out of it. I'm becoming that anti-racist. The problem with thinking and thinking I am not a racist is that it signifies a neutrality in our thinking and in our outlook towards the racism struggle. The claim that I am not a racist denies that there is a hierarchical system that white people benefit from and that hurts racialized people.
So Canada is viewed as a multicultural society, but in all essence, it actually is not. I am a witness of that, being a black woman. I have suffered a lot of racism since I set foot in Canada. When I left Zimbabwe, I thought I'm going to a free country, but surprise, surprise, that wasn't the case. The only way we can do we can undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it and then dismantle it. Right now, I am married to a white man, and it can be very difficult for me to discuss the issues of racism with my white family, because obviously they will think I'm attacking them, I am profiling them being white, and every time we try to go to that racism issue, everybody gets very defensive. We are not racist because you are in our family. But, you know, when we say, are you a racist or you are not a racist? The answer is you are an anti-racist, which is the correct term to use. But we have to continue to talk about it so that people can get comfortable to be able to discuss these issues about racism. So the words racist and racism have become to be a very unspoken term. And this is why it has become an equivalent of a slur. It has become politically incorrect to call out racism, and we are careful not to enter into discussion, even with our friends and our relatives. This racial phobia is designed to freeze us into inaction, making talking about it very, very difficult and tricky. We need to use these terms, race and racism, as descriptive terms as the only way to undo racism. So when we are talking about racist and racism, we are merely talking about how you make another person feel. Take an example, what Lynn said, that she didn't put the name of a colored boy forward. Imagine how that boy felt when he thought he qualified for the job and he didn't get a reason why he didn't get the job, right? So this is how racism is usually practiced here in Canada. It's very subtle. Sometimes you can't see it. But for us, we can feel it. So for racism, you can never see it, but it is felt. And I believe racism is taught. You are never born a racist, but you are taught to be. Because parents have to tell their kids that she is different, she is black and you are white. You are not supposed to communicate with him or her because they look different. Right, do you agree? Okay, do you understand where I'm coming from? Yeah, so we must consistently discuss about this so that it will no longer be a white elephant in the room, right, Lee? Yeah, so yeah, let's go on to the next one. Yeah. So to talk and teach the truth about who we are, we need to face our demon history. The goal is to destroy the white supremacy and the white privilege. So the history of racism, people have seen color for 200,000 years. And this is because color has been used as a form of power. So anybody who is white is regarded to be more superior than anybody who is brown or yellow or green or, you know, whatever color besides white, right? So race and racism were constructed in the 15th century. And imagine, racism is not even 600 years old. And racism also began back in the slavery trade, because the white people decided or thought that the black people are the ones that are supposed to be slaves because they are regarded to be inferior. But in all essence, black people and any visible minority, we are not inferior to anybody. We are just like everybody else. We all have red blood cells in our systems. The only difference is we have a different accent and also a different melatonin. So people from the same ethnic groups are the natives to certain geographical regions, typically share the same genetic profile. The table, okay, this is the Canada ethnic groups as of 2021. Do you notice anything different on this table?
How many generations back do you go to be considered Canadian?
Canadian. Yeah.
So the definition of ethnic is that you have origins in the area, country where you live. So Canadian, it could be, I don't know, 4 generations, 6 generations. I'd have to go back to Stats Canada and ask them, what is a Canadian?
Yeah, so my question is, do you notice anything missing on this? Yes.
There, from what I could see, appears not to be any originating persons from any country in Africa.
Yes, there are no black people there. Yes, there are no black people there. There's Canadian, which is everybody, including me. I'm now Canadian because I'm now a citizen. There's English. So these are people from England, Scottish from Scotland, Irish from Ireland, French from France, Germany, Chinese, Italian, Indian, Ukrainian, First Nations, and Métis. And the black people are missing. Right. So the explanation that we got from so the explanation that we got from the Statistics Canada is that they couldn't include the African people there because we are made of so many different ethnic groups.
I'm just going to go see if I can get some new batteries, maybe that will continue on.
Do I need this for now?
Yeah, so.
Yeah. So what they said is because African people, we are divided, or we belong to a lot of ethnic groups amongst ourselves. But for me, you know, when I saw this, I thought, that's not right. Is it because we belong to the slavery trade that we should be missing from this? But they said they have an explanation to that, which is they say that African people belong to so many cultural groups because we have the West, we have the South, we have the North, and we have the Central Africa. But to be honest, I think Africa should just have been put at the end, right? So that we are there as well, we are counted. If anybody, or a kid, if you show this to a kid, they will think, oh, there are no black people, and so black people are not even considered to be people at all, right? Yeah, so, and so we noticed that from this table, the white people cover 65% of Canadian population, and then the rest is made up of the visible minority, which include the Indians, the Chinese, the First Nations, and of course, us, the black people. So, so Africans should have been put maybe in between First Nations and Métis, somewhere there, because We are, of course, a very small population here in Canada.
So, I better take this. When I was going through school, what I learned about race is that there are 4 colors that are normalized with 4 different parts of the world. Now, does anyone recognize this color coding? Do you remember getting the 4 colors? And there's also, we may not get the order, but there is also an order. So does someone want to yell out a color?
Red, yellow, white. And I'm not sure, I'm going to say, is the 4th brown? But I don't think it was.
Yeah, no, it wasn't, but it's close. So white is the supreme, right? First, we all think about what you think about white people. Yellow. What characteristics do you associate with yellow? So that would be your Asian, right? The Far East. Red. Indigenous, yes. And there's indigenous people all over the world, all different ethnicities. And just like black people, there are many, many sources of genetic backgrounds for black people. But this was a very, very simple code for how power structures could slot people into certain characteristics, jobs, where they stand in the hierarchy of importance. So I'm wondering if I took this, like many of you did, I'm sure you all recognize this from your school, and I was 14 years old, and I saw a yellow person come in. He's probably brown, but he would have been considered yellow, subcontinent. Yeah. I had already known that boy was not good enough. He wasn't white. And this is subconscious, this is subliminal. This is not something that comes up in your mind on the surface. I can see that we've got to move on. So this hierarchy was never meant to be neutral categories. Racial power created them for a purpose.
Okay, so we do have the 6, yeah, it's working, yeah. So we do have the 6 races in the world, and these are made up of the Latinos, Asian, Africans, finally we are on the list, and European, Indigenous, and Middle Eastern. And race is a genetic mirage that humanity has organized itself around in very real ways, and new forms of power were generated using the word race. The power to gather, categorize, and judge, and elevate and downgrade, include and exclude certain people. Later, Blumabach, who is the one that made these 6 races in 1779, came to the conclusion that individual Africans differ as much or even more from other individual Africans and Europeans. And furthermore, he concluded that African people were not inferior to the rest of mankind concerning healthy faculties of understanding and excellent natural talents and mental capacities. The United Nations General Assembly also emphasized that any doctrine of racial superiority is scientifically false, morally condemnable, socially unjust, and dangerous, and must be rejected together with theories that attempt to determine the existence of separate human beings.
So we're coming to a conclusion from all this history, is that the opposite of racist isn't I'm not a racist, it is that I am an anti-racist. And this infers three things that you must do as part of being following an anti-racist doctrine. First, a racist believes that our problems are rooted in groups of easily identified people. So we can say that the Indigenous people get what they deserve. And I'm not going to go into any more like bad generalizations about groups of people. We all have them in here. They're subconscious. You have to work on those. But anti-racists locate the roots of problems in power and policies, which is called systemic racism. One either endorses the idea of a racial hierarchy as a racist, we rest on our laurels as white people, or racial equality as an anti-racist. And one either allows racial inequities to persevere or persist as a racist, or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. So that implies action. There is no in-between safe space like I am not a racist. You are either racist or you're working against racism. So I'll talk a little bit about what we can do about as anti-racists. First of all, we have to recognize that systemic racism is a starting point which launches the truth and reconciliation process. Canada is a racist nation because its policymakers and policies have been steeped in systemic racism since the beginning. The continued presence of Indigenous people back in the 1600s was viewed as an obstacle to European land claims. So institutions, policies, and practices were developed based on this racist view of Indigenous peoples. And this deeply entrenched colonial dynamic continues to inform the relationship between non-Indigenous Canadians and Indigenous peoples. Now, the Raven Trust is a group that I support. They are a legal organization in BC fighting for land claims, and they're helping the Wet'suwet'en people who are now facing court charges. There's 17 people that we're trying to protect their land. And if you consider what pipelines are going through there and what those pipelines are for, then you have to make a decision, a moral decision. Do I want that pipeline or do I want to save the land? This is a cohort of mine, Pamela Barnes and her husband Grouse, who run seminars online. I've been to several of them, and this one coming up is called Truth Shows Itself. And it describes a lot about the colonialism system, the colonial system that created the hierarchy based on skin color, which nominally includes our white supremacy. The result is that white people have historically been seen as superior in cultural, political, and economic power over racialized groups. So I want to tell a little quick story here. I know we're getting short on time. The last session, the last class of the last session, Pamela invited any of her students to become what's called a co-conspirator, where you put something of yourself on the line. And what's happening is there's a lot of residential development, as you know, around Kelowna and West Bank, and the land that they traditionally gathered on is being eaten up by nice big houses. And so what she wants to do is plant elderberry bushes Unfortunately, the only thing that you are allowed to plant on government land is conifers. So I have offered to go up with her, and she's an elder, like I don't know if she can even bend over, but I've offered to go up and help her plant elderberry bushes as part of their going back to their traditional collecting habits. And elderberries are really, really good medicine. So if anyone wants to support, and maybe you don't want to go to it, but you want to give her $150, this would be a really good cause. She's also supporting a family that's going through generational trauma. Grouse attends all funerals and people that are in healing. He's a healer himself and does a lot of work in their community. Now, I bet you all know this guy. Do you know this fellow? This is Justice Murray Sinclair, who handed in the Truth and Reconciliation Report in 2015. I want to tell you a little bit about this report. It was 4,000 pages, 7 volumes, 600 witness statements. That's people who survived, the survivors of the residential school system. $72 million and 94 calls to action. Now, this wasn't out of the blessings or good heart of the federal government. They were facing a court claim, much larger than $72 million if the residential school survivors went to court. So to prevent this large class action, this Truth and Reconciliation Report was the government's offer. Unfortunately, in the last 8 years, only 13 of the 94 calls to action have been completed. The Yellowstone Institute of Toronto is no longer doing annual reports, as there isn't enough action to warrant a report. So if anyone wants to talk to me about this initiative, I can send you to a website where you can do funding, or Amnesty International offers reading circles several times a year, our local Amnesty International group, and you can learn more about the 94 calls to action. Okay. Yeah, change it. Upside down. Okay.
Race is not neutral, and we always say I am an anti-racist, but myself, I identify myself as a person who is fighting against racism. Anti-racist recognizes new forms of power through history, and this goes back to slavery, where the white person or the white people came to Africa and enslaved the black people. And ever since, black people have been considered as invisible, as workers, but never as leaders. Anti-racists must identify unearned racial privileges. Anti-racist recognizes the racist mirages that affects people's lives. And I want to tell you that racial trauma is real, because I also went through it big time when I came to Canada. It affects your whole soul. And as I said, racism can never be seen, but it is felt. Anti-racist locates the roots of problems in power and policies. So what the policymakers also need to do is to do a lot of work so that there is a lot of work against racism. Anti-racist confronts inequalities while fighting for an equitable society. Yesterday I was watching this video of a dog, a monkey, and a cat. They were all hugging and sitting together, but they are different species, right? And why can't us humans do like what animals do?
So in conclusion, I would like to give a quote from my hero, Kendi. There is nothing I see in our world today, in our history, giving me hope that one day anti-racists will win the fight, that one day the flag of anti-racism will fly over a world of equity. What gives me hope is a simple truism. Once we lose hope, we are guaranteed to lose. But if we ignore the odds and fight to create an anti-racist world, then we give humanity a chance to one day survive, a chance to live in communion, a chance to be forever free. Thank you.